And your father wasn't perfect either. But he was pretty damn close.
This Is Us is back for season 2, and we're finally getting some big clues into Jack's death. Let's break it down right here on what happened. What's going on, you lovely people? Lisa here, and I really hope that you replenished your stock of tissue because season 2 of This Is Us kicks off tonight, and we're getting some big clues as to how Jack died. Now, before I get to that part and what happened in the past timeline, let's break down the current timeline. I also just want to point out, I love that Ron Cephas Jones is still a part of this show as we hear him narrate the episode, reading from his book of poems that he left for Randall, and we actually do get to see him once, but I'll get to that in a bit. So in the present timeline, it is the Big Three's 37th birthday, and they're celebrating on opposite coasts and dealing with their own problems. Randall and Beth are still dealing with the possibility of adopting another child. Now, Randall is super enthusiastic about it, but Beth, not so much, and of course it's Randall, and he doesn't seem to pick up on all the kind of body language and clues that Beth is giving that she is not really all for this. Randall's just been so overpowering and so really into this idea that Beth hasn't had that option to really voice her opinion. But she finally does blurt some stuff out during their meeting with the adoption agency, and Randall finally understands she's not too happy about it. In the parking lot, she ends up telling Randall that, he never asked her what she wanted, and Randall just basically says this whole thing isn't going away, so she needs to get her head around it, and that was definitely not the right thing for him to say. Beth storms off and goes to her special spot in the park, and we find out via flashback that that was actually William's special spot. Now, in this little flashback, Beth expressed to William how Randall keeps doing things without asking her, like bringing him home and then also letting Kevin live in their basement for a year, and it's just been frustrating for her. But William, being the wise soul he is, says it all turned out okay though, right? Now, while Beth is at the park, Randall pays a visit to Rebecca and basically demands to know the truth about if her and Jack both really wanted him. Rebecca reveals that she had actually said no to adopting Randall at first, but Jack was just so determined, and she says sometimes someone has to be the one to push to make the big moves, and that was usually Jack. She also says their marriage wasn't perfect, but none are, and Jack wasn't perfect, but he was pretty damn close, and also how that stranger he pushed on her ended up becoming her child who became her life. Randall returns home to Beth and tells her that even though his mother doesn't think there's such a thing as perfect marriage, he actually disagrees with her for once because he does think there is, and he thinks the two of them are perfect together, and also just basically perfectly imperfect. The two are able to adjust to the other, so he starts to say that he can adjust on this topic and he'll go volunteer somewhere, take care of babies, do whatever to fill his, need, when Beth cuts him off and says, "Can I take you somewhere?" And she takes him to William's special spot in the park where they kind of watch these underage boys sneak drinks and, kind of heading off on the wrong path. And Beth tells Randall that if they're going to do this, they're going to go all in. Being inspired by watching those boys, she says, let's take in an older kid who no one else is going to help. And Randall seems to like the idea because later we see them on a computer looking at older orphans. We also get to see Beth's birthday present to Randall, which is William's poems bound up in a book for him. For Kevin and Kate, they're both now in LA. Kevin took the Ron Howard movie and Kate is working on her auditions for singing. Sophie ended up having to cancel last minute, so she isn't able to fly in for Kevin's birthday because of her mom's MS, and she's actually pretty bummed because she's not going to get to go to the places that the Kardashians frequent. Also, did Kevin and This Is Us kind of predict what was going to be going on with the Kardashians this week? Because it seems perfectly timed, because Kevin tells Sophie, oh, it's fine, because by next week there'll be a bazillion more of them. And this week, rumors dropped that both Kylie and Khloe are pregnant, and of course Kim's surrogate is pregnant with their third child. So yeah, do those This Is Us writers have a crystal ball or something in their room? Since Sophie doesn't show up, Kevin is the third wheel with Kate and Toby for their birthday dinner, and well, it's actually more like Toby's the third wheel with Kevin and Kate. Kate ends up ditching her audition when Toby tries to ask her how it went. She just brushes him off. Meanwhile, at the birthday dinner, Kevin lets it slip that Kate had already told him about the audition. So now Toby is pretty fed up that Kate takes everything that Kevin says seriously, and Toby's opinion doesn't matter as much. Toby ends up storming out of the restaurant with Kevin in tow, and he basically just tells Kevin that, he's supposed to be Kate's person. They're getting married. That's his job. And it's not supposed to be Kevin, and Kevin's not her father or her husband and all that kind of jazz. Kate walks up and tells them both that she doesn't need to be pushed or coddled or taken care of by anyone. She can take care of herself, and this kind of gives her a resurgence of her confidence. So she goes back to her audition, which she had blown off earlier that day because she was surrounded by a lot of young, skinny girls that kind of got into her head. Now, she tells Kevin and Toby not to follow her, but of course they don't listen and they follow. Auditions are over by the time Kate gets there, but she ends up talking the guy into letting her sing, so she gets up and sings Nothing Compares to You. But after a few bars, the guy cuts her off. Now, Kate immediately thinks it's because of her weight and how she looks, which is why she had bailed on the audition in the first place, and she gives this whole confident speech, and it's like, you go, girl. But the guy, even though he is a jerk, pulls another girl up on stage and says, sing the same song, and she sounds really good, actually. He then tells Kate that that girl actually was not even good enough. She was their lead singer, but she wasn't strong enough, and they demoted her to backup singer, so their standards are set pretty high on who they're looking for, and it had nothing to do with Kate's weight. It was her singing skills. She didn't have enough range and her voice wasn't strong enough. Oddly enough, Kate's so happy about this rejection because it wasn't because of how she looked, it was because of her craft, and she needs to work on her craft. Now, while she was in the audition, Kevin and Toby are waiting outside and resolve their issues as well. Kevin explains that Jack, their dad, died when they were 17, and Kate is the one who had to tell him about it. So they're more than just brother and sister. There's like a deeper bond there, and he can't just kind of back off overnight. Kevin also explains that he isn't really that good at anything, including acting. He just tries really hard, but it was so easy to be Kate's brother, he never had to try hard. So it's a little bit harder for him to kind of cut the cord between the two of them quickly. So Toby kind of makes a compromise and says, you know what, can you just stretch the cord a little? Kate and Toby return home and work on their singing skills with some karaoke, while Kevin returns to his hotel to find that Sophie is waiting for him and made the trip after all. Okay, now to the flashback timeline and the big clues about Jack. We pick up right where we left off last season, with Jack staying at Miguel's after that big bar fight and the blow up with Rebecca. Rebecca picks up the teenage big three and they meet Jack at a diner where they tell the kids what's going on, and they're being really open and honest with them and say, hey, you know what, we're taking a few days for ourselves. And of course the kids are like, oh, is there going to be a divorce? And they reassure him that there's no talk of divorce. Kate actually wants to go with Jack, but they say she can't, so of course she's upset, storms off, the other two end up following behind, and Randall also kind of seems like he's pretty upset for a reason, like he's holding something in and he knows more than the other two. We learn in a flashback that Randall actually left the party the three kids were at early and walked home that same night and saw Jack and Rebecca's fight. They didn't see him, but he watched some of it and snuck back out before they noticed. Now, while Jack sits and waits for Rebecca's call, she forces the kids to go see a Tom Hanks movie, but even Tom Hanks can't fix everything that's going on with this family. Jack tries to make things better by going to a nearby club where Rebecca had performed with the band and asks if they can, book Rebecca for a solo gig or something, and even offers to pay the guy, but that doesn't go so well. Later in the day, Rebecca shows up at Miguel's looking for Jack, and she pours her heart out to Jack, basically telling him that she should have never asked him to leave, and they need to work on this together. Now, Jack surprises Rebecca with some truth bomb as he tells her that she doesn't actually know everything about him, and he reveals that he is an alcoholic and he's actually been drunk for weeks, and he is drunk in that moment then. He says he has to get all that under control before he can actually walk back into their house, and he needs to do it on his own, so he closes the door in her face. I'm sorry, Jack, but you're not getting rid of Rebecca that fast. She knocks on the door again, and when Jack opens, she tells him to get in the car and they're gonna fix this problem together. We then see the two driving home in the car, and that's when we get our first big clues as we go forward a little bit, as we see Rebecca in a Steelers shirt driving home upset, and in the passenger seat is a bag with all Jack's things in it. The kind of things that they put in a bag and give you that they take off of a dead body. We also see that Kate and Randall and another girl, who I'm guessing could be Randall's maybe first girlfriend, they're at Miguel's house crying. Kate's also cuddling a dog. Kate tells Randall they need to find Kevin and let him know what's going on, and we see that Kevin is off making out with Sophie somewhere and has a big cast on his leg. We then go back to Rebecca, where we see her pull up to their house with that red mailbox to see that the house has burned down. And that's all the clues that we're getting for this episode as it comes to a close. Alright, so did Jack die in this fire? Did he cause this fire? Did he cause the fire because he was drunk? Did he go in to rescue someone from a fire? What really happened? These are all definitely bigger parts to the puzzle that we're gonna get. And we do know that Jack died when the kids were 17, and from what it looks like, the events of this moment were only maybe a few months from the time that Jack told Rebecca he had that problem. Okay, so also, the camera highlighted a few things. Like I said, the girl with the red hair with Randall, the dog Kate was holding, and Kevin's cast. So what is the significant meaning behind these? All I know is that the events definitely shake up the family, and we can kind of see in this episode why Rebecca ends up with Miguel, because he's always there for that family. We see him let Jack stay with him, and then on the night of Jack's death, the kids stay with him. So he's definitely there as someone to lean on for the family. And I'm kind of guessing that that's why Kevin especially is kind of so standoffish towards Miguel, because it was easy for Miguel to slip into that role, even though that was probably not the intention in the first place. He probably thought that Miguel was trying to be Jack. But you know what? After kind of seeing this progress, I'm okay with Rebecca and Miguel being together. At first, it was kind of like, eh. But now, Miguel, it seems like you're a really good guy, so I'm for it. Alright, so what do you think of tonight's episode and the reveals about Jack's death? We'll definitely be getting more clues throughout the season, and I think I read we will in fact learn for sure how Jack died this season. As a premiere episode, it wasn't a super thrilling and exciting episode, but it was good, and it made me want more. And, you know, I didn't actually tear up in this episode, but I definitely kind of felt things stirring. Let me know your thoughts on this episode, and then click right over here to check out my interviews with the casts of a couple new shows, including Law & Order True Crime, The Menendez Murders, which also started tonight, and also with the cast of Valor on the CW. I'm Lisa. Thanks so much for hanging out with me and talking all things TV. See you next time.